Hi everyone. Make sure we're up and running okay. We've got 6 people already, that was quick. Put some green beans. Can't see who it is yet. Can one of you just comment if you can see us and hear us okay, please? 9 people. 12 people. Popular. Oh, we've got Leah, Amy, Michelle, Samantha. Can one of you just comment, please, and we can get started? Make sure you can see us, hear us. Thank you, Julie. Right, we're up and running. So, hello everyone. Today we've got the live antenatal class with NCT antenatal teacher Zerin Smith. She's from Zerin Smith Antenatal and Baby Massage, but I'll let her speak a bit about what she does in a minute. If you've got any questions relating to anything baby related, labour, anything to do with current circumstances, any worries, concerns, pop them in the comments and I can ask for you as we go along. But yeah, please do ask. It's always good when we get questions back and forth. No question is stupid, even if you think, oh, I'm not sure whether to ask this. If you don't want to ask it on the comments, send me a private message. I can read it out with no name, so there's always that option as well. But enjoy, and over to you, Zerin. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. And you know what, Jade? That's exactly what I always say when you mention that there is no silly question. There really isn't. Normally what you do find, if somebody asks something, they think, oh, should I ask that? Oh, really, should I know that already? There's going to be other people thinking exactly the same thing as well. So yeah, absolutely, as when we are live, please ask whatever questions that you want to. But also, as Jade mentioned there, actually, if you'd rather talk about anything privately, so actually it's not coming over on the live session as well, then please do send a private message and we can make sure that we have some contact and we can answer those questions for you. So I'll say hello first of all and introduce myself. So I'm Zerin. I am an NCT antenatal teacher, and I've been now working with the NCT for 9 years. My eldest child, Charlie, is 10, and he is the reason actually that I became an NCT antenatal teacher. I went on an antenatal class when I was pregnant with him, and the friendship group that I made and the support and the information I got just made me feel this is what I want to do. I've got a background in training, so that side of it came really quite naturally to me. So as Jade mentioned, I am Zerin Smith Antenatal and Baby Massage. So I do teach IAIM baby massage classes as well. And I also teach, which some of you may not have heard of before, called story massage and movement classes. So they're kind of the next step along from baby massage. So as your babies are starting to get older, they're starting to develop, it's adding in lots of other ways that you can use positive touch, but also stories, songs and rhymes to help aid your baby's play, and also to kind of help aid that stage of development that they are as well, things that are going to engage them and most of all be fun for them as well. As I mentioned, I am a mum of 2 children. So I have Charlie, who is 10, and Violet, who is 7. So I'm here today to talk a bit more about the kind of things that are useful to know whilst you are preparing for your labour and birth, and especially during this period of time. So I'm so aware from all the different people that I'm speaking to that there are so many changes and restrictions in place at the moment, and it is making a big difference to people's experiences, but also how they plan for their labour and birth as well. I mean, one of the biggest things that are having an effect is not being able to have your partner or your chosen birth partner with you at certain points in your labour. and how to prepare for that, what sort of things you can do in advance that might help you with that situation, but also the types of appointments that you may be having with your midwives that would either otherwise would have been face-to-face may now be telephone consultation, and also again that care after you've had your baby. Some of those appointments as well are changing. So at the moment, the one thing that I have been signposting all of the expectant parents that I'm working with or who have contacted me with questions is about being aware of what are the current situations, the current restrictions that are happening in your particular area. Now, I'm in contact with parents from across lots of different areas. Leicester is my main area, Leicestershire. However, I'm working with groups in Nottingham, and further sort of north in the Midlands, and also stretching out sort of to the south of the Midlands as well, and groups in Bedfordshire. So there are differences in different areas. For instance, there has been some recent changes just this week, so to what were, and I class them as restrictions because it was a change in what was available to labouring women, which was our birth centres. So up until this week, the birth centres had been used and were being focused on areas for women who had either suspected or confirmed coronavirus. Whereas now, what they're doing, they've found another area for those women and their partners, and they've reopened the birth centres, which means they've also reopened the birth pools within the birth centres in Leicester as well. And some of you may be aware, our home birth team has been working with parents across this whole period of time. That's not something that has been taken away. And they have seen a really big increase in the amount of people choosing home birth. And some of the biggest reasons that people are doing that is because there is that fear of going into hospital when perhaps that can be avoided, but also because of the people's preferences and what they'd like to try and use during their labour and birth pools have been a really, really important one. St Mary's in Melton Mowbray, that has remained open as well. The differences in St Mary's and also within the LRI, the general, the hospitals in Nottingham, as I say, in Bedfordshire and lots of other ones, is then once a mum and baby or babies move on to the postnatal ward, it's at that point there that partners do go home. So again, there has been a real difference in the length of time that people are staying in the hospital. And I think it's finding a real balance, making sure that you and baby are okay, baby is feeding, you have felt that you've got the support that you've needed before you then make your way home. And of course, yes, you still have your midwifery team who are there to support you as well afterwards, and can be contacted by phone. They do have in place at the moment sort of points when they would normally still try to come and see you face to face, which is around about 5 days for that 5-day appointment. But in certain circumstances, they can still do face to face according to what mum and what the baby needs as well. So some of the things I did want to share with you were some of the frequently asked questions that I have received over the past 7 to 8 weeks. As I say, that's kind of the time scale that it's been so far. It's hard to believe it's been that length of time. I'm sure being pregnant and either self-isolating or protecting yourself at home with your baby, it certainly has felt a very long period of time, and not being able to be around friends and family physically is so hard. And so many people I'm talking to with new babies are saying that's one of the hardest things afterwards, is not being able to share your new baby with your friends and family. And of course, yes, we have facilities such as what we're doing now, but that part of being able to have your baby coddled by their grandparent can be difficult. So hopefully, even by Sunday, we're looking to see if there are going to be some changes in what might happen. But otherwise, as I say, we can look for all those other methods that you can still feel supported. So some of the frequent questions are, when do I go to hospital? What do I need to look out for? And is there anything specific that might mean actually that I go to hospital earlier than perhaps what I would have done? So what is normally shared with you through the type of antenatal classes that I do, and I, as I mentioned, I'm an NCT antenatal teacher, but also what does get shared by your midwives and other classes, such as the ones that are at the hospitals. They'll talk about, and we'll start to give you more information about what are the different stages of labour, and actually understanding what are some of the signs that you may feel and that you may see that might indicate actually this is what you do in this scenario, this is when you make contact with your midwife, and actually this is the point that you do go to the hospital. So labour is divided into 3 main stages. You have first stage, second stage, third stage. First stage is where you traditionally, I'll sort of refer to it as, see and feel contractions. How you feel them can be so very different to different people. But what is happening in that first stage is your body is preparing for the birth of your baby and also working with your baby in that way as well. So you will be dilating. So your cervix is dilating, you're having contractions, which are creating that dilation. Now, whether you've heard of it referred to in centimetres before, quite commonly we hear it being referred to full dilation, which indicates then the end of first stage, is around about 10 centimetres. Now, that is a really rough guide. It's not that your midwife is actually going to be measuring that particular centimetre opening, but what she's looking for is just changes that your cervix is ready for birth. Now, a lot of women, if they do have sensation, do start to feel the difference in their contractions from first stage to second stage. But it's normally, as I say normally, it can be very different for different people, that it is during the first stage that you will be contacting your midwife, calling the midwives to you for your home birth, or actually contacting the hospital, whether it then be the birth centre or whether it be the delivery suites. Because at the end of first stage, that's when a lot of women, sometimes there's a pause in those contractions, but a lot of women then, if they do have sensation, they will feel the difference in those contractions, and they talk about a feeling of urging to push as well. So some of the signs during that first stage, contractions and how far apart they are one of the ways that you'll start to recognise when to move into the hospital. You are recommended to try, if possible, to stay at home for as long as possible during the first stage. And some of the biggest reasons are, whilst you're at home, you're able to have full control of the environment around you. You've got all the different rooms and areas in your house to sort of utilise and use for your comfort. Upright movements, positions where, as I say, you are upright, forward and open, are really good for helping to decrease the length of your labour and also to make your contractions more efficient. But you've got access to your fridge, to the food and the drink that is there. So when you feel like snacking, you've got distractions, even such things as TV, music that you can put on. So it really does help during that first stage to help progress the contractions to progress the labour, but also to make you feel comfortable as well. And those two things do go hand in hand. If you've heard of a hormone called oxytocin before, it's oxytocin that your body produces that really drives those contractions and the stages of labour where you are. And it's oxytocin that is produced when you feel more comfortable, when you feel that level of privacy, and you have those things around you that do help and assist you as well. So contraction-wise, roughly the recommendation is for contractions to be anything from 3 to 5 minutes apart, which is at the point when you are in active labour. So therefore, if you were to arrive at the hospital, they would assess you in some way, and that could be very different for different people and what you're comfortable with. But therefore, you're in active labour, so therefore you've got the support of your midwives at the hospital or the birth centre or with you. Now, when we're measuring contractions, kind of that's the important bit, because it's, well, how do you measure them from the start to the end? The way in which you measure a contraction is the very start point when you start to feel that squeezing, that tightening, that pressure. Some people feel it in their bump, kind of, you might see my hands kind of coming round, sort of remembering what it felt to have a pregnancy bump. Or some people do feel it more so in their back or lower down in their pelvis, but they'll feel waves of sensation. So when you're starting to feel that first wave, and then all the way through where you start to feel that wave as it starts to reach its peak, and then you start to feel that edge away, and then also you're measuring that gap in between. So you're measuring from the very beginning of a contraction to the very beginning of the next one. The sensation part of that might be, for instance, about 45 seconds, perhaps even up to a minute long. And then that gap in between may then be a few minutes. So if your contractions are 3 to 5 minutes apart, of course, considering lots of other things as well, then that's the point in which to make contact with your midwifery team or the hospital as well. There are other signs of labour that some people may experience first. Some signs may be actually an indication that things are moving in the right direction, but it doesn't automatically mean that actually you're going to experience labour even perhaps within the next few days. And that may be things like never particularly wanted experiences, but such as sickness and diarrhea. They're fairly common that people start to experience them at some point during their labour. And again, what we just advise to do is just to be aware of that. And please make sure that you're not going to be dehydrated. So drink plenty of water and eat as well, as much as that you can. And then be aware of any other signs that may start to occur as well. The mucus plug, or the show as it's sometimes referred to, can also be a sign, again, that those changes are starting to occur in your body, in your cervix. And as the name suggests, really, the mucus plug is mucousy. Sometimes I describe it as a bit of a, you know, those, and it sounds horrid, but you know that kind of snot that you get when you're really full of cold and it's quite stringy. You open up the tissue and it's just, it can be that kind of consistency. Some people, it may even come away without you being aware. You may sit on the toilet and your mucus plug comes away. For other people, it may come out in a large amount or actually in smaller amounts. And it's not uncommon to have a little bit of blood with your mucus plug as well. So you be aware, are there any other signs of labour that you're feeling? Generally, how are you feeling as well? But then continue and wait for other signs. Now, with anything, if there's anything that worries you in your pregnancy or anything that worries you or that you feel that you've got questions about in your signs of labour, then do contact the delivery suite or your midwifery team. And they can then ask you questions and ensure that being in home is going to be the best thing for you. Or again, they may invite you in to just to do their checks and ensure everything is okay with you and the baby as well.
And sorry,
water's breaking.
Am I okay? Just a quick question.
You can.
When you're talking about contractions, obviously
yes.
people can mistake that for Braxton Hicks and false labour. Can you just explain how you would tell the difference? I know, like, from my point of view, I'd say you just know, but that's not obviously a very good description to give to people. But if you can just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Braxton Hicks, again, some people experience them really, really strongly, whereas other people, they may just get a little bit of flutterings and it can almost feel like the baby is moving. So Braxton Hicks are practice contractions. They're your body getting ready for labour and birth. Some people can experience them from as early on as 20 weeks or so, and what can perhaps sometimes start out as those small feelings. Other people, as I say, can feel them really strong, and describe them as a real tightening, a squeezing, and you look at your bump and you can see as it's hardening. And yes, that has some real similarities with contractions. And as you say, Jade, actually, it can be quite, for some people, I use the word easy. Anything when you're kind of unsure is always worth considering and thinking about. You feel a difference. The main way to tell between a Braxton Hicks and contractions is, are they starting to create a pattern? So do you see them sort of getting closer together, and are they roughly, kind of to say, the same time apart and getting closer as well? And then if you notice that, it's then worth being aware of how far apart they are. And actually, sometimes they may be at the stage when you're ready to go into hospital as well. So it's the pattern that they create, and getting closer together is the real main way of knowing what the difference is.
And is there always a pattern if it's real contractions, or could you not have a pattern and actually be in labour thinking it's Braxton Hicks?
You can. As much as we say that as you're getting closer to the end of first stage, your contractions get stronger, they get longer, they get closer together. There's so many factors that can affect the contractions and how you feel in labour. From the journey to the hospital, that's one of those ones that many people have said to me, well, before I left home, my contractions were about 3 minutes apart. But once I got to the hospital, they'd stopped, or again, they're about 10 minutes apart. And that can be an effect of the environment and the situation, and your body's creating oxytocin, whereas actually it's probably then starting to produce adrenaline, which then sort of counteracts that oxytocin. So again, another reason why we talk about relaxation, positions, massage during labour, not only for your comfort levels, but also for that progression of labour as well. So it's not always there's going to be a clear pattern. There can be times where contractions reach a certain point, then you find there's a larger gap, and then the changes may be really different. So again, instinct. Always talk about instinct when it comes to labour and birth, and also once your baby is here as well. Trust those instincts. Sometimes there's just that feeling of something that says to you, do you know what, I really think this is the real thing now. And if in doubt, that's when you make the phone call to the midwifery team or the hospital, and they can look at all the other factors and talk that through with you as well. Yeah.
Thank you for answering that.
Nah, you're welcome. So water's breaking was the other one. It's not always a gush and a whoosh like you see in the films and you see on the different programs. Yes, it can be that way for some people. Sometimes it may be a little bit of a trickle. Sometimes it might be you've had a cough or you've had a giggle and there's a little bit of fluid there then that covers your underwear. This is when it gets really glamorous at this point, when people say, well, I'm not sure if it was my waters that broke, or actually it could have just been a little bit of wee, I'm not sure. Don't worry, most people in pregnancy, there's been, the pressure and the position of the baby, there's going to be times when a little bit of wee does escape. Now, as I say, the glamorous bit of it, everybody knows, or everyone should be familiar with, kind of, if you were to sniff that liquid, if it was wee. That it kind of has a usual smell to it, whereas the smell of amniotic fluid is quite different. It has almost like an earthy, sweeter smell to it. But we're not saying as well that you need to be the one to say, okay, I've sniffed it, it didn't smell like anything different, I'll carry on. Anything that you think could be amniotic fluid coming away, then you do call through the midwifery team or the hospital. And of course, they're going to ask you a few more questions, such as, can you see any of that fluid? Can you see the coloration of that fluid as well? So one thing that's really, really good to do, maternity sanitary pads, they are great for the later stage of the pregnancy, but also those first few weeks after you've had your baby for the blood loss that you're going to experience as well. So pop one of those into your underwear if you think some fluid has come away. If you can move around a little bit as well, kind of what you're doing is moving your pelvis, which might mean some more fluids might come away. So therefore, once it's against the pad, it might give you more of an idea of the colour of the fluid. Again, really quite common for a little bit of blood to be there as well. But if you're seeing anything that has a greenish tinge or even greenish flecks or a browny colour in there as well, then it could well be that the baby has had a poo. So its first poo is called meconium. And for anyone who has done some of those first nappies with their baby, that meconium is kind of sticky and it's black. When I recreate it in nappies to have a little go at nappy changing, I normally use treacle or Marmite, but Marmite's one of those things not everybody likes because it has that similar kind of feel to it. So that is something, again, that you would report to the midwife or the hospital. And according to any other signs of labour that you might be having, again, how you're feeling, you may be invited into the hospital to be monitored, check how you and the baby are, or advised to see if there are any other signs of labour, but to stay at home and be aware if labour's starting as well. But as I say, the real communication I want to share is anything that you think could it be, couldn't be, but anything that is a worry, that is what your midwives are there for, and they will happily answer any of your questions and put your mind at ease as well. Some other signs, that perhaps things that you don't need to make contact with anyone, but again, it's really, really common that people talk about a feeling of nesting. It can sometimes be referred to, and just a feeling of knowing that something's going to happen. That can sometimes sort of indicate that change of hormone and that things are going to be happening soon after as well. It's worth as well sharing all these different things with your partners, who is going to be your birth partner, so they again know how best to support you. They know what sort of things to be looking out for. And when we talk about contractions, we always sort of advise if birth partners can be aware of the timings of those contractions, it means the mum who is in labour doesn't have to think about those timings, can purely simply concentrate on working with those contractions to be as comfortable as possible as well. And then when it reaches that point where they are closer together, you can then take the action of kind of what you decided is going to be the best thing for you, as I say, whether that's home birth centre or going into the hospital as well. So that should give you a bit more information of what to do in those scenarios.
I had a really good app as well. I can't remember what it was called, but I can find out and put it in the comments. And I would literally, Joe was actually doing it in the end because I just couldn't concentrate, clicking it every time I had a contraction, and it would work out for me the times, and it would set an alert to say, you might need to go to hospital soon. Then it popped up saying, yes, call the hospital, and it told you step by step, which I thought was really good, because you might think, oh, do I, don't I? So I'll find out what that is and pop it in the comments for you.
Yes, there is an NHS one, so yes, we can share that in the comments for you should anybody want to use that one. Yeah, and I think when it comes for birth partners, it's, and again, what kind of preparing them for the labour and birth, they might be the point thinking, well, do I do it now? Do I phone through? So having them have that information can help them feel more at ease, but more confident in making sure that the right care is there for you as well. Yeah, absolutely. So the different stages. So first stage, as I say, is the point where you are fully dilated. Second stage, it's during the second stage where your baby is born. So the length of time from the end of first stage to second stage can be really different for different people. Anything from a few minutes to a few hours. And then once your baby's born, from second stage, third stage is the birth, the delivery of the placenta as well. And again, there's options and choices when it comes to that third stage, but that's what your midwives can help you with, making sure that you have the best care and the best method according to the type of labour and birth that you've had as well. So those stages of labour, they're the sort of things I've had a fair amount of questions about as well. Birth plans is another one that I've had more questions about recently. Some people refer to them as birth plans. Some people refer to them as birth preferences. Either way, it's not about planning this exactly how your birth is going to be and that everything is going to happen at this stage at different times. But it is important to know what is important to you. It's important to know about all the different types of labour and birth that may become an option and a choice for you, and knowing within those different scenarios what information you need to make decisions, but also, again, as we're saying, kind of what were the sort of things that feel important to you. So when it comes to those different options, whether it's a type of labour and birth that wouldn't naturally be your choice and option, but it means in that particular situation you can make informed choices, and that's the important thing. And that's where people talk about having that sense of control and understanding that you have asked those questions to know that's the best type of care for you. So an acronym that some people find really, really useful, because you think, well, what questions do I ask? I don't know what I should be asking and what I shouldn't. And sometimes the way you feel leads you to ask those questions. But BRAIN is an acronym that is used a lot when it comes to labour and birth. And B stands for benefits. So are there any benefits of what is being suggested for you or baby? Are there any risks involved? And of course, with any type of action, there is going to be measured risks. But what are the particular risks, if there are any, in what is being offered and suggested? A stands for, are there alternative methods or other options and choices that might be right for you at that time? I, do you need more general information about it, but also going back to that instinct feeling as well? Now, N, as much as it stands for nothing, it's not the fact that you are doing nothing and that nothing is happening, but it might well be that you continue on the course of action that you've been taking already. Is that safe for you and the baby to do so? And then review the situation, perhaps say, for instance, half an hour later, or it could be longer depending on what the scenario is. So it just gives you a bit more confidence to ask the questions that might give you that information to make those informed choices. So that's BRAIN. And again, we can share that with you in the comments afterwards. So benefits, risks, alternatives, information, instincts, and as I say, nothing, but perhaps continuing on the course of action that you're taking there at that point as well. So it's important to discuss with your birth partner what the sort of things that you would include in a birth plan or your birth preferences. Now, you can record that in your maternity notes that therefore be handed to your midwife as they walk through the door or as you get to the hospital or birth centre. But it can be just having that conversation to know between you what feels right for you. For guidance on doing that, The NCT website has a really good page about the sorts of topics and sorts of information that you might want to consider and include. But there is also a free resource on the NHS website, and it goes through a series of different questions for you. So it helps to guide you to start thinking about some of the things that perhaps you may not have considered before. Also, there is the Positive Birth Movement website. They have free visual resources that you can use to create your birth preferences as well. So it's not just a matter of sort of writing it down. You've actually got visuals that are really, really easy and clear to see that you can print off and then put into a document or slip into your notes as well. Yes, there's different scenarios where there's more opportunity for your midwife to review them, and that's why I always say making sure that yourself and your birth partner both know what those preferences are, so then you can talk about them at the time. And again, really importantly to say, what you feel beforehand might be really different to what you feel during the experience itself. So just because you may have put, okay, this is my preference on this topic, doesn't mean you cannot change your mind or change how you think about that. But it just gives your midwife an idea of some of the things that you've been practicing and using, such as relaxation techniques, support using different positions, your thoughts and your preferences on the different types of possible birth interventions, and things like pain relief as well. There are all the sorts of things that you can include in there also. So that can be really, really useful to do to help to prepare for that labour and birth as well.
I know a few people, like clients that I've had, have said they were adamant, like they didn't want an epidural, for example. They put that in the birth plan, and at the time I was like, just give me an epidural. But because they're discussed in detail with their midwife or their partner, they said no, you're not having one because you've told me not to give you one under any circumstance. So if you're absolutely adamant, make sure it's clear, because you won't be in the right frame of mind and you might be annoyed at yourself after. And people have said to me, oh, I'm so glad that he said no, she doesn't want one really, because I'm so glad I didn't. So bear this in mind if you're willing to change your mind if you need it, or if you want them to be strict and say no.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. And as I said, there's different scenarios, different things, such as I think pain relief is a really good one to highlight that. Looking at all the different types of pain relief that are available, they are the sorts of things that people can have quite strong feelings about beforehand. You don't know what you'll need and what will be right to you until you're in that situation. So having that information beforehand may mean you think about it a certain way before, but it just means that you have all that information, so when it comes to the point of making that decision, you know it is the right one for you at the right time. And yes, with your birth partner knowing that, yeah, you can change your mind, things can be different.
I think with things
absolutely.
Like cutting the cord as well, because I've been in situations where I've photographed births and they've had like the mum and the dad, like the woman's mum and the baby's dad, and it's like, oh, who's cutting the cord? And they've kind of argued that who's cutting what. So it's usually the dad, but just have that in your birth plan, like this is where I want to cut the cord, or simple things that you might not think of, but at the time, if you're zoned out because you've been on gas and air or something, and you don't want an argument when you've just had a baby, so it's little things like this to think about as well. So who's doing what?
There is. Yeah, simple things such as if you don't know the sex of the baby when the baby is born, some people, they don't want the midwife to say, here you go, you've got a baby boy. They want to be able to discover it themselves. So it's not always the really sort of medicalised side of labour and birth. It's about the environment. It's about all those little details as well that can make a difference to your experience.
Yeah, very good point. There is a question, well, there's two that are related to each other. Somebody's asked, Megan, would I call the maternity assessment unit or the birth centre when I go into labour?
Okay, really, really good question. So it depends on where you are in your labour. So if you are before what's classed as full-term pregnancy, which for a single pregnancy is 37 weeks, unless you have been advised otherwise in a certain scenario. Before 37 weeks, you would phone the maternity assessment unit. So whether it is something that you're feeling, such as less movements, perhaps you become aware of, or a sign of labour, before 37 weeks, call the maternity assessment unit. If you are after 37 weeks with a single pregnancy, then it would be the delivery suite. With twins, the full-term pregnancy may be 36 weeks in some cases. In other cases can be a little bit earlier, and they would then advise you what to do in those scenarios. But generally before 37 weeks, maternity assessment unit, after delivery suite.
That's it. But even if you ring the wrong place, they'll always put you into contact with the correct. I don't even know where I rang. I used to ring all sorts of places, and they used to be like, I'm just transferring you. They're used to it, so.
Exactly. Absolutely. They are lovely like that.
Samantha's asked a similar question. She said it's her first baby. She's only seen the midwife once. She's 24 weeks and she's just confused about everything. She's rang the doctors to try and get a midwife appointment, said they would contact her, but she hasn't heard anything. She's just not sure what to do, contact details, what happens when she goes into labour. I don't know when you have your midwife appointments and things, but I'm guessing she should have had some by now.
So it sounds like she's had an appointment already. With the midwifery team. So that should be the midwife that she's seen, that should be part of a midwifery team that should be overseeing her care. Now, if she hasn't had communication from that team or from that midwife about when her next appointment is, then we need to make sure that she gets that information. Now, it can depend on which team looks after you, where they are based. For some people, that can be based at their GPs. For other people, that can still be part of a hospital area, or even on one of the children's centres as well. Some midwives are based. Now, what I would definitely advise her to do, it sounds like she has been trying to make contact. I would say continue to do that. And contact the GP if that's where they're based, because what should be in place for her is knowing when all those different appointments are going to be. So unless there's medically another reason why certain people need extra appointments, your midwife appointments will always fall on certain weeks of your pregnancy. So really continue to see if she can get hold of that midwifery team through the GP. If she can't, if she's not getting anyone come back to her, please feel free to contact me and we can make sure that we can sort of escalate it further to make sure that she does get the right care in place. So when she does have her midwife appointments, they should help to prepare her to know those different points of when you go to hospital, but also as well looking at the different choices of where she would like to choose to have her baby. But I think if it's okay with what was her name, sorry, or was it anonymous? If Samantha would like to direct message you and then you can pass her details on to me, I'm really happy that we can have a phone conversation or as I say, a face-to-face conversation that we can go through all those different things, just so that she can feel assured of knowing the right information and sort of what to do in all those different scenarios as well.
That's brilliant, thank you for that, because it's a scary time, especially your first baby. You're clueless, aren't you? And even if you've got experience with babies, like I thought I'd know everything and I didn't. Like, it's a scary time, so you just need that reassurance from somebody like professional. So
yeah, you absolutely do, when it comes to all the different stages of your pregnancy, but also having that person and those people that you can chat to, that you can say, oh, this has happened, does that happen to you, and oh, is this a common thing? Because Googling things gives you certain answers, but it doesn't always give you the correct ones, and it can bring up lots of different things. So yes, you want to make sure that you have got that trusted person that you know you can ask and you can get the right information for it as well. And I think this is where antenatal classes are so good, because you do get the right information, but you have that support network. And with that not being available in all the different places that it was before, this group, Jade, is fantastic that you've set up, because it means that people are getting the right information from the right people, and you've got the type of group where you can say, oh, has this happened, what do I do? And there's always other people there who have experienced something or know where to look and can guide you in the right way as well.
That's it, otherwise you'd just be Googling, wouldn't you? And Google's not great in situations, and the things you Google as well. If anyone had checked my history when I was pregnant after giving birth, I'm like, what has she been Googling? So,
we're all the same, absolutely. really are.
Embarrassing, absolutely.
Yeah.
Somebody's asked about birth pools. Is it only the ground floor that you can have a birth pool on? Because her living room's on the second floor.
No, absolutely. Again, sometimes you may be advised to have a little look at not so much building regulations, but no, it doesn't have to be ground floor. Definitely speak to the home birth team, and they can advise you what their current situations are. I'm not aware of them only going into the first couple of rooms when you go into a house. There are some occasions where it has been advised, so I would definitely say contact the home birth team and let them guide you on what their current guidance is, because it can change. But overall, no, it doesn't have to just be ground floor. I know people who've lived in flats and they've had birth pools in their flats as well.
That's good to know, because there was somebody else I saw recently ask that question. They live in a flat and can they have a birthing pool in there? So I'll find whoever that was and let them know. Another question, is it true that the baby moves less during the end of pregnancy?
So your baby, it's not that they're moving less, it's that they're moving differently. And those movements that perhaps would have felt like punches or kicks or a good elbow start to feel more like the baby is moving their whole body. So when it comes to movements, it's not about counting a certain amount each day. It's recognizing what feels usual for your baby. And yes, there are some people who said, well, I went last week, I phoned through to say that the movements felt different. Or you can, and that's definitely the best thing to do. If there are any worries or the amounts of movements feel different, then do phone through to the maternity assessment unit and they can ensure that everything's okay. Babies have lazy days. Babies do have days where they tend to move or sleep for longer and have less movements. But if you are recognising there's differences, then always contact through. Kicks Count is a really good website to have a little look at with more information, as I say, and they do describe it not being the amount, just the feeling of them might be slightly different.
And I always see comments as well of people saying, oh, I've not felt my baby move today, but I don't want to bother them. And I was exactly the same, but they would much rather you call and get checked. And I had to go in 2 or 3 times with her. And I felt so stupid every time, because she would move the second they hooked me up. And I was like, it's typical. But they always said, we would much rather you know your baby's okay than the worst happens. So you're never ever wasting their time. It's what they're there for. So please. Absolutely.
And the midwives never make you feel that either, do they? You might have that feeling of, the baby's moved straight away. For them, it's giving you that reassurance. And as you say, they'll always say, come in, never worry about making that contact.
And I know it, like current circumstances, that you don't want to go to the hospital more than you need to, but it's obviously they've done all they can to prevent any spreading of the virus or anything. So it would much rather you go and check your baby than stay at home because you don't want to catch anything, and obviously you don't want to, if anything was to happen. So they're advising against their home Doppler kits as well. They always have, haven't they? Because if you think you can hear a heartbeat and it's not, or anything, so just don't rely on those because you're not trained to use them.
No, Absolutely. And yeah, that reassurance that the hospitals are there's such stringent guidelines in place to ensure your safety when it comes to the sort of exposure to the coronavirus. Before anybody walks through the door, your temperature is taken, they're asking about the sort of symptoms or anything that you are showing. So they really have got those strict guidelines to ensure your safety as well. So absolutely don't let that current situation change if you would or wouldn't phone through. Yeah.
And I'm just giggling at this one, I'll tell you why, but I've heard you can poo during labour. How likely is this? I'm so worried about doing this in front of my partner, and I'm laughing because it happened to me and it's happened to most people I know. And I didn't think I'd ever tell anybody that, but it did, and it's just one of them things that you can't help it, and you don't care at the time. Trust me, you do not care. And Joe, my other half, he was literally, because I was in the birthing pool, he picked it up with his hands and put it straight down the toilet, and he still takes a mick out of me now, but it's just one of them things, so don't worry.
Absolutely. If we're sharing, I did it too. Yeah. So how common is it? I don't have a statistic to give you. It's not always something that is recorded accurately. But what I will say, as Jade has said, it is really quite common. But as much as we can laugh about it afterwards, it can really be a restriction to some women in how they feel during labour, and actually sort of being able to sort of de-stress in a way and let go. Your midwives, as soon as it may appear, it will disappear. It is really common, and it's common during that second stage when you are pushing. With the method and the way that you're pushing, it may mean, yes, that you might have a poo, but the midwives, some partners don't even notice it as well. I have to say, it can be dealt with that quickly and swiftly that they're not even aware of it. So as much as it's easy for us to say, try not to worry about it, because the midwives deal with this so much every day, I know that it can have a fear factor. What some women try to do, because again, that this last few sort of weeks of pregnancy especially, it's quite common to feel constipated and to experience constipation, is if you are really constipated, again, contact your GP who can prescribe you something. But eating fibrous food and drinking plenty to try and empty your system as much as possible beforehand. But yes, according to the length of your labour, it may well happen. But to absolutely reassure you, as Jade said, they wouldn't blink an eyelid about it.
Oh no, like my midwives were great. Like I wouldn't have noticed just because it was in a pool, and but I said, oh, I don't want to poo, and they were like, you're not, don't worry, even though I knew it. But they, and that births I photographed, the woman hasn't even noticed sometimes. Obviously I don't photograph that part, but they've literally just got rid of it straight away, and no one in the room has noticed. It's only because I'm focusing on it that I did notice, but otherwise you wouldn't have even known.
Yeah.
So
no,
don't worry.
And I have to say, with your partner going hands-on like that, majority of the time, the midwives have a little special sieve for the birth pools that they will get rid of it. So don't worry, partners haven't got to get there ready and scoop it out
don't worry,
themselves.
It's not a thing that your other half or birthing partner has to get it, don't worry.
No.
Although tell them that, you know, I told Joey has to get in the pool with me naked, and he believed me right up until 8 months pregnant. So if you want to tell them,
when it comes to packing your bag, the things to have with you, your birth partner, that's one thing for them to consider if you are hoping to labour or birth in the birth pool, for them to have that appropriate clothing to get in with you if that's what you both want.
That's it. Just another question. What happens during an induction?
Okay. So it can depend on the reason for the induction, whether it be a condition of pregnancy, whether it be a condition of the baby, or if, and fairly commonly so, an induction is offered because you are past your estimated due date. So currently within our local areas, 41 weeks and 5 days is the suggested offering of induction. Now, I always use the word offering because it is down to the person who's pregnant to make the decision if that's right. And the reason why I talk about it in that way is because for some people, their estimated due date can be really quite different to what actually was documented on their first appointment. So you have your original date according to sort of the idea sort of time-wise of conception and your menstrual cycle, and then you might actually find that your scan, one of your ultrasound scans, changes that date, and for some people can change it quite considerably. So whether they have and take the option of inducing at 41 weeks and 5 days, or actually they look to delay it till another point where they actually think that they are closer to being that accurate date, is something that they could talk about with their midwife, and they can decide the best course of action. So if you were to go into the hospital for an induction, there are several things that might happen. It would start with an internal examination for the midwife to identify, are there signs of labour there already? Is there any dilation of the cervix, or even any changes in the cervix as well? And from knowing that, that could perhaps mean that there are different options and choices. For some women, they actually may be so far dilated that they are then classed as active labour, and then will continue the labour and review what happens there. But some of the methods are a synthetic form of prostaglandin, which is the hormone that your body produces in those first stages of labour. So this could either be done as a pessary, and there is a 24-hour pessary that could be removed at the right point, or there is a 6-hour dissolvable pessary that both are placed internally, and then that release of that hormone is hoping to see some changes in the dilation of the cervix and also with your contractions. At some point after review, a part of it may be being offered to have your waters broken in hope that that may progress things further. And then another stage of induction will be the synthetic hormone oxytocin, which is then placed intravenously. So through a cannula in your hand, they will then input the synthetic form of oxytocin. And again, they will adjust that to try and mimic what contractions would naturally be. Statistically, it is more likely that you would ask for, perhaps want or need a stronger type of pain relief, but it doesn't mean it's the case for everybody. But statistics do show there is an increase in pain relief such as epidurals and pethidine following an induction as well. So it would be working with your midwife who's caring for you to see kind of where you are in labour and birth already, seeing how your body reacts to different types of induction, to then kind of decide on what's going to happen next. So there are lots of different options. Doesn't mean that every single one is going to be a consideration, but they're some of the methods that they might use. There's also one now that's becoming more common called the water balloon, where a small tube is inserted so it comes into contact then with the cervix, and a small amount of fluid is inserted into that tube. So it creates a bit of a balloon that then sits against the cervix, and that contact helps to produce that oxytocin to again hopefully induce and progress that labour. But they're some of the methods.
And you can't have a water birth, can you, if you're induced, is that right?
It can depend. It can depend on what type of method of induction and the length of time after. So it's not a definite no. Work with your midwife in that particular scenario. It could still be a possibility.
Brilliant. And just looking at the poster behind you with the different birth positions, is this something that a woman would pre-plan, or is it just what the midwife would advise during labour, depending on what's happening?
Yeah, so there's different scenarios where different positions might be more appropriate for you, and there's certain ones that you can't do, such as an epidural. Doesn't mean if the epidural is there fully and you have got that loss of sensation in your sort of lower body, you're not going to be walking around, which is great for labour and birth. But actually you may then be supported to move onto your side, so you can still therefore have some movement. But definitely beforehand is a really great way of sort of preparing for your labour and birth, because movement has been shown to have such a positive impact on your labour. So that could be simply from walking around and moving. It could well be sitting on a gym ball or a birth ball, they're the same thing. It could be leaning over cushions or the side of the bed. Lots of movement positions a lot of women find come quite instinctually, but knowing what those different options and choices are as well, it just means that at those different times that thought might come into your head, or your birth partner might suggest, why don't we try that one? And changes in movements as well can help the progression of labour. By moving and opening your pelvis in different ways means that you create different space for the baby, so that can be good for help to manoeuvre the baby into the pelvis and for your baby to make the manoeuvres for birth as well.
Brilliant, thank you. No more questions have come in, I'm just checking. Have you covered everything that you wanted to cover?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you've mentioned, if anybody wants to ask a question, if anybody wants to even talk something through when it comes from a birth plan or preparing for labour and birth, and obviously what we haven't sort of talked about, which is sort of everything after your baby's born, then please feel free to contact me. And if anybody wants more information about the antenatal classes that I run, if you go onto the NCT website, all our courses are now virtual, so we cover everything that we would have done if we were face to face, and also you get those friendship groups that are great as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important, isn't it, after having a baby, just having that little community, and hopefully that's what we're doing here, but it's nice to get there as well.
Do you know what, that's exactly what I was going to say. That's what you've created here in this group as well, because once people have had their babies, this group is great for those questions after. Yeah.
Because you will have a million questions. It's like, is this normal? Is this normal? Am I doing this right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it just helps, doesn't it, for somebody else to say, yeah, this is what we did, this is what we faced, and it can really put you at ease.
That's it. You all have the same silly questions about what's what, and it's so true, and you think, oh, I feel really silly asking this, but when you do, it's like, oh yeah, I was the same.
Yeah, and that's it. As you say, there is never a silly question. As much as you think there is, there really isn't.
There's really not. But no, thank you so much for your time. That was brilliant. Hopefully a lot of people realise what actually to expect and what to prepare for, and because it was good detail, that, because normally people don't talk about the detail and like the nitty gritty, do they? And it doesn't like prepare you properly. You just think, oh, my waters are going to break and I'm going to go straight to hospital and have the baby straight away, and it never really happens like that. So it's good.
It's so very different, isn't it? And this is it. There's so much untalked about parts of labour and birth, and after you've had your baby as well, there's the really untalked about things. People, beforehand come to visit the baby, how are you? Perhaps, they do mean it when they ask it, but don't actually want to know the amount of blood loss that you've got and perhaps how your stitches are feeling and things like that.
That's it, things that people don't talk about, but you can talk about it in this group, it's fine. And
yes,
that's why I try and be as open and honest as I can, because I just want to tell people that this is a true reality and we can talk about this openly. You don't need to be worried or ashamed about anything. It's just normal.
Definitely not. Exactly. Exactly.
But no, thank you. This little one's passing me all sorts of things. So she woke up just on time.
You didn't get the full hour in the end, did you?
No,
bless her.
It's getting less and less each day. So, but at least she was quiet for the most of it. So I'm like, please don't press your noisy toys. I'm just looking at her like, please. But no, thank you very much for that, and thank you everybody that joined us. You might get more questions later when people watch after work or whatever, but no,
absolutely. I'll keep a lookout.
Brilliant. Enjoy the
nice to see you, Jay. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.